Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Politics Rant on the Aztec Multimedia Network. This is Crashdown. Over the last little while, you've heard me and Bubba J on the, or maybe you haven't, but if you haven't, go ahead and head over to our other show, Kitchen Conversations. But you've heard us talk a lot about the current political climate. We usually devolve into talking about the riots. At least over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about the riots. But here on Politics Rants, we talk more about one hot button political topic and kind of rant about one little thing. And this week we're going to discuss the Democratic National Convention that happened last week. This year's DNC has been panned as cringy by many who are not diehard Democrats. Aside from the mostly virtual setting, as far as speakers being distant and giving their speeches from a studio somewhere else, whether it's at their home, or something local to where they're at, where they can, maintain their relative seclusion and from, the current crisis with the pandemic. It was lacking in production, to say the least. The closing ceremony, the closing song for the opening night was kind of indicative of the way the rest of it went. It was just really, it was done really poorly with, very bad green screen and superimposition. It was bad. And I'll admit, I didn't watch much of it, but the highlights that I've seen were very bad. During the DNC, Joe Biden was officially nominated for president, and Kamala Harris announced that as his running mate, which, both officially accepted. I'm not going to go into the list of speakers as it was a who's who of the establishment Democrats from the political and celebrity arenas. But not watching the convention, I've relied mostly on political commentators to give me the gist of what the platforms and the policies were that the Democrats addressed during the 4-night show. As best I can tell, they really didn't bring any forth during the DNC. A lot of it was, a lot of their position is basically Trump bad, us good, we need to get him out. Not wanting to lean on the biases of others, I've looked up some of the stories about the Democrats and their policy positions as a party and Biden's personal positions on the issues. We're going to go ahead and talk about some of these things. And the first stop was the official web page of the Biden-Harris ticket, joebiden.com. Finding the positions held by the Biden campaign are easy to find. Under the menu, go to Joe's Vision, and you'll see his bold ideas as the page itself is titled. We aren't just going to rebuild what has worked in the past. This is our opportunity to build it back better than ever. This is the statement that leads off Biden's bold ideas. I personally like the statement. I like the idea, the concept. There are some things that are wrong with this nation, but I want to reiterate something I have said for years and stand by to this day. On paper, America, this country, the United States of America, is perfect. If you look at the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, there is a framework there for a nearly perfect society. Right there in front of you. You can't miss it. The problem is it has been corrupted, almost from the start, by the interests of men, and now women, who become focused on themselves and maintaining their positions of power. When it comes to his vision and his idea of rebuilding and build back better than ever, let's not go too nuts here, okay? On the website, he has like 46 different policy interests. I don't know if they're all policies, actually, now that I think about it. A lot of them just seem to be points of interest of what Joe Biden's. A lot of them might not all be policy positions. They could just be points of interest that Joe Biden thinks needs to be addressed. And he might be right. I have issues with some of them and what they're trying to do, and I'm not going to go over each and every one of them individually. There are some that I'm going to hit, but some of what I consider the more extreme and questionable ones, and I'm not going to lie, my bias is going to be coming out here. I will be talking about a little bit more in depth in some of his points. jobs and economic recovery for working families. And I'm assuming, and that's his idea of what needs to be done to recover from the coronavirus shutdowns and the quarantines and the lockdowns and everything else that's gone on in the United States directly related to that. Racial equity across the American economy, 21st century caregiving and educational workforce, sustainable infrastructure and clean energy future, ensure the future is made in all of America by all of America's workers. Joe Biden's roadmap to reopening schools safely. Biden's agenda for women. And I don't know that all these are going to be his presidential things, but they are all points that he needs to address to look good for the nomination and to make people think he might actually be a good candidate. Personally, I don't think he is. Leadership in times of crisis, specifically as it relates to COVID-19, is on there, and this is, again, why he is a good nominee. Proposal to set up support for deserving small businesses. I'm sorry about that. Proposal to set up support for deserving small businesses. 4-point plan for our essential workers. Plan to upscale employment insurance. A plan for bankruptcy reform. Combating the coronavirus. And I have said some things on that, and I'll probably reiterate those here after a bit. Lift every voice. Biden's plan for America. Black America. Each one of these are a separate point, but plans for Central America, immigration, veterans, military families, encouraging unions and empowering workers, education beyond high school, ending gun violence, violence against women, criminal justice reform, rural America, older Americans in retirement, healthcare, which is always a huge topic, especially since the Obama administration. I mean, it's always been a huge topic, but with the Affordable Care Act, and as hard as that was pushed by the Obama administration, of course, Biden is going to focus on that again. Restoring America's leadership, climate change, K through 12 education, housing, LGBTQ plus equality, opioids and substance use disorders, investment in the middle class, and environmental justice. He has plans for all of those. They can all be found on his website. He has agendas also, and I'm not entirely sure what the difference between an agenda as a plan is, but that agenda makes it sound makes me feel it's not quite as thought out. And his agendas are for the Muslim American community, Jewish community, Indian American community, which I'm assuming that is Americans who have immigrated from India and not Native American, AAPI community, Latino community, Black community, students, Catholic community are all his agendas. And I did miss one of his plans. He also has a plan for bankruptcy reform. Did I say that already? I don't think I did. I don't remember saying that one, but he has a plan for that. And of course, we have a couple other things. He has a campaign finance and government reform. And then he also has a commitment to the Indian country. I'm not entirely sure what that means. To me, all sounds very... I question a lot of the titles for these things, and it makes it seem very, very regressive as opposed to progressive. So, Joe Biden is not a progressive. And neither is his running mate, Kamala Harris, as much as she tries to play it off. I mean, she is not a progressive, neither is he. They are both Democratic establishment cronies. She plays a progressive on TV, and she has been voting. According to some of the other things that I've read, she has been one of the most progressive senators in the Senate, or when it comes to bills that have come before them, the way she's voted and the things she's supported heartily that way. So, but I was looking for certain things. I wanted some place that would break it down just a little bit more, or a little bit broader, instead of going through entire pages for issues that Joe Biden wants to push on. And I'm going to go ahead and look at a Politico article that was updated on March 5th, 2020. And these are basically just really rough points. Like, I'll just read through them all. These are his views on each of these topics. Capital punishment and death penalty, abolish it. Cash bail reform, end it. Cocaine sentencing disparities, scrap the disparity. Mandatory minimum sentences reform, eliminate them. Private prisons, eliminate them. Minimum wage, raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. That's a huge issue I want to talk about. Paid leave. Indicates support for paid family leave and sick leave. Reparations. Study reparations. Now, mind you, this is back in March, and a lot of his positions have changed, publicly at least, on these things. Charter schools. He's against for-profit charter schools. Cost of college. 2 years should be free. Student debt. Expand or fix existing debt relief programs. Teacher pay. Boost teacher pay. Campaign finance. Unlimited spending should not be allowed in politics. Nuclear power. Support developing new nuclear technologies as part of an effort to fight climate change. Oil and gas drilling. End new oil and gas lease on federal land and end offshore drilling. That's his position. Reducing carbon emissions. Tax carbon emissions is his perspective and view. And he's with Pete Buttigieg, Julian Castro, John Delaney, and Andrew Yang, who were also nominees at this point in time. Farm economy, strengthen, enforce, but not stop short of trust busting. I'll have to research that because I'm not entirely sure what that means. Farming and climate change. Pay farmers to adopt climate-friendly practices. Rights of farm owners and workers. Expand farm worker protections, but no specific plan for USDA civil rights. Assault weapons. Support a voluntary buyback program. Background checks. In favor of universal background checks. Weapon registry. In favor of a national firearm registry. Abortion. Some limits. ACA coverage expansion. Build on the ACA foundations. Drug cost. Linking to oversee prices. Medicare for all. Opposes Medicare for all, but would expand coverage. DACA. Citizenship for dreamers. Illegal entry. Leave the statute in place. Transportation. Pay for infrastructure through challenging taxes on corporations and the wealthy. Legalize marijuana. It's a state's issue. Marijuana convictions. Scrap past pot convictions. I can get behind that one. Defense spending. Boost the defense budget. Overseas deployment. Keep the troops deployed. Increase capital gains taxes. Is his position on capital gain tax. His increased capital gains tax rate is his view on capital gains taxes. Corporate income taxes. Raise corporate taxes, but keep rates lower than before 2017. Wealth taxes. Increase existing taxes in upper income America. Rural broadband. Dedicate open-ended federal funding to support rural broadband. Social media. We should consider holding companies legally liable for user posts. Tech competition and antitrust. We need more investigations first. China. Don't worry so much about China. NAFTA, USMCA. Support the revised USMCA. Tariffs. Don't use tariffs to pressure countries. TPP 2.0. Support joining CPTPP. So he's got a lot of, he's got some issues that are kind of all over the place. Very centrist, in my opinion. Very much a moderate. He has been in office of some form for nearly 50 years. He did 44 years in the Senate and 8 years as vice president. And for the specific points, and let's see the stances on some of his issues. And this is his stance on COVID-19. His plan is to address the pandemic, includes offering free testing to all Americans, calls for hiring 100,000 people to form a national contact tracing, as well as increase drive-through testing sites. Biden's plan includes steps designed to help businesses and schools reopen, including financial support for retraining and rehiring workers, building a best practices clearinghouse for schools, and guaranteeing paid leave for anyone with coronavirus or who is caring for someone with the coronavirus. The former VP also said he would contact Anthony Fauci and ask him to stay on as a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force should he win the general election, and he would mandate a public policy of wearing masks for everybody. Police reform. He does not support calls to defund the police, quote unquote, which picked up some steam after the George Floyd incident and the Breonna Taylor incident, but he does support some of the idea of what defund the police means. Andrew Bates said that the former vice president supports the urgent need for reform, including funding for public schools, summer programs, and mental health, and substance abuse treatment separate from funding for policing, so that officers can focus on the job of policing. Biden's campaign said he backs proposals to increase spending on social programs separate from local police budgets, but he also wants more funding for police reforms, such as body cameras, training specifically on community policing approaches. I like that idea. Biden has called for an additional $300 million in funding for the community-oriented policing service program, which would allow more officers to be hired and would pay for training on community policing approaches. So a lot of reiterating there on that particular statement, in my opinion. For the climate crisis, he would spend $1.7 trillion to set the United States on track to eliminate net greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. His proposal embraces elements of the ambitious Green New Deal, addressing renewable energy infrastructure, climate change proposals, and seeks to go well beyond Obama's climate goals. As part of the proposal, he is calling for an end to fossil fuel subsidies and a ban on new oil and gas permits on public lands. He would also re-enter the Paris Climate Accord. The plan leaves it to Congress to decide what enforcement mechanisms would be used to require corporations in the U.S. to meet emissions goals, penalize them if they fall short. His economy is boosting the middle class, is one of the main pillars of his campaign. It says we need to build an economy that rewards work, not just wealth. Biden wants to repeal tax cuts that has been enacted by the current administration and is pushing for a $15 an hour minimum wage, eliminating non-compete agreements for workers and expanding access to affordable education, including free community college. In an interview with CNN, Biden said he would raise the top individual income tax rate to 39.5% and raise the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%. Education. Biden has proposed an education plan that would increase funding for schools in low-income areas, help teachers pay off student debt loans, and double the number of health professionals working in schools. A core element involves tripling federal Title I funding for schools that serve low-income areas, closing what his campaign called a $23 billion funding gap between majority white and non-white school districts. Last year, he unveiled a plan that would cut student loan debt obligations, waiving $10,000 per year for up to 5 years for those public service workers, teachers, and military. He would also guarantee that those earning less than $25,000 owe nothing on their undergraduate federal student loans, while everyone else's payments would be capped at 5% of their dispensary income above $25,000, cutting in half the current 10% gap. In his the way he wants to handle gun violence. Now, mind you, this is all on a CNN website. CNN Politics, election 2020 candidate Joe Biden. So this is some old data here. He will push a ban on so-called assault weapons if elected. He helped lead the effort to ban assault weapons in the 90s. He wrote that the United States has a huge problem with guns and that assault weapons, which he defined as military-style firearms designed to fire rapidly, are a threat to U.S. national security. He also told CNN's Anderson Cooper that he would push for a federal gun buyback program in an attempt to take more weapons off the streets. He supports universal background checks and said assault weapons should be illegal, period, quote unquote. In the first Democratic presidential debate, he called for smart guns requiring manufacturers to include biometric measures that would block firearms from being used by those whose fingerprints aren't registered for that specific weapon. He also focuses further on gun manufacturers. Our enemy is the gun manufacturer, not the NRA, the gun manufacturers, quote unquote, he said in the debate. He also unveiled a healthcare plan that would greatly expand Obamacare's subsidies to make the private insurance policies available on the exchanges more affordable, further enhancing the Affordable Care Act, basically. Plan would also create a new public option similar to Medicare that people could buy into. We're going to add a public option, and the public option says whether you are having employer-based insurance or private insurance, or you're in the exchange, you can join up for Medicaid, Medicare-like provisions in the law and not dump 300 million people on Medicare all of a sudden. He added that those covered by employer-based health insurance plans could also choose the public plan if they prefer it. And again, he repeated, but if you like your private insurance company, you're able to keep it. That's what Obama said. That's the first thing Obama said about it. If you like your current health care, if you like your current doctor, you can keep them. I don't believe it for a second. Biden supports a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. He's also called for Congress to immediately grant citizenship to some undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children. He also said that undocumented immigrants with no criminal record, quote, should not be a focus of deportation. In an interview with CNN, he opposes decriminalizing crossing the border without documentation, something other candidates were all for back in the day, and a lot of Democrats have moved that way towards an open borders policy. I think people should have to get in line, but if people are coming because they're actually seeking asylum, they should have the chance to make their case. Absolutely agree with that particular policy. But what about the Democrats themselves? What is their policy? What is their particular stance? And according to an NPR report from late July, so just about a month ago, the Democrats met remotely to discuss and approve a lengthy policy platform that seeks to balance the interests of the Democratic Party and the more liberal factions. They say liberal, but they wrote liberal. They should say progressive. The platform draws heavily from a report issued in July that was a joint task force organized by Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders. It tries to bridge a gap between Sanders' progressive politics and Bernie's more moderate approach to governing. And in all honesty, I'll wait on that one. It endorses the draft that was released, endorses universal health care and makes it clear that low or no cost coverage for every American is the party's eventual goal, backing a single mandatory government-run health insurance program. But it does call for adding public options to the existing Affordable Care Act. It does have a nod to Medicare for All, which is what Bernie Sanders has pushed, but it stops just short of endorsing a Medicare for All program. It does set aggressive goals for combating climate change, including making all American power plants carbon neutral by 2035 and adding 500 million solar panels and 60,000 wind turbines to the country's electricity grid within the next 5 years. That's going to be expensive. Calls for a $15 minimum wage, mandatory paid family leave, more federal gun control, pretty much everything that Biden has been sitting on, which is really, he's basically sitting in and taking a very democratic establishment view of things. And the establishment is becoming more progressive, or at least looking more progressive, to try to pull in that leftist vote. Let's look at some of these other issues. First thing I want to look at is this is going back to Biden's website, racial equity across the American economy. What exactly does this say? And the bullet points, there's a bunch of rhetoric that starts us off, but the bullet points for this are spur public-private investment through a new small business opportunity program, reform opportunity zones to fulfill their promise, make a historic commitment to equalize federal procurement, ensure his housing plan makes bold investment in homeownership and access to affordable housing for Black, Brown, and Native families, achieve equity in management, training, and higher education, opportunities connected to the jobs of the future, boost retirement security and financial wealth for Black, Brown, and Native families, ensure workers of color are compensated fairly and treated with dignity, ensure equity in Biden's bold infrastructure and clean energy investments, support second chances for economic success, strengthen the Federal Reserve's focus on racial economic gaps, promote diversity and accountability and leadership across key positions in all federal agencies, build a 21st century care infrastructure, address longstanding inequities in agriculture. As each of these bullet points are expanded upon, spur public-private investment. Small business ownership is one of our country's cornerstones. He has a 13-point plan that he rolls out here, and I'm going to read through the breakdown for the expansion of each of them. Spur public-private investments through a new small business opportunity program. Small business ownership is one of the country's cornerstones for wealth building and job creation. And he mentions that racial disparities in wealth and access to capital combined with outright discrimination in the financial sector have contributed to inequity in small business ownership, growth, and success. To address racial wealth gap, the opportunity gap, and the jobs gap for black and brown people, Biden will launch a historic effort to empower small business creation and expansion in the economically disadvantaged areas, particularly for Black, Latino, AAPI, and Native American-owned businesses, in addition to providing small businesses with ambitious restart package to survive the current crisis and come out the other side strong. On the surface, I like that concept at least. The problem is it's focusing on minority communities, and my issue is we're attempting to start a small business of our own, and we can't get funding either. So to say you shouldn't matter. I am all for anybody who feels that they have the wherewithal to become an entrepreneur and start their own business and try to run a business that they build from the ground up, or even buy into a franchise. McDonald's, Burger King, Steak and Shake, whatever. I'm all for that. I very much appreciate anybody who's willing to try to take a risk and do something for themselves, at least from a financial perspective. You don't get rich working for somebody else. You get rich by working. Really, the real way you get rich is by stabbing everybody in the back and climbing over the bodies until you get to the top. But you don't have security working for somebody else, because somebody else can always say, yeah, we don't need you anymore. To say that I am going to work for myself and I am going to put my own money, my own time into something and have it be something that I built. That's what we need more of. And this company, this entire country was built on this concept. And everybody, I love the idea of building your own business. I mean, like I said, we're trying to do it. I'm in the process of helping out building one also. So yes. And that actually plays into an education aspect, that, one of the YouTubers that I watch regularly really pushes, and that's reworking the education system to actually teach young people about the real world at a young age. Because you got a lot of these kids who have no clue what the real world is about when they go to college. The only time that doesn't matter, knowing what the real world is about, is from a place of wealth. And in the past, it has been left up to an individual's parents to teach them. And, a friend of mine has a daughter who's working toward her master's, possibly doctorate in geology, and she's taught her very well. She's very frugal, handles money very well. But not all kids who go to college have the wherewithal to actually understand what it's all about, and they get lost very quickly. So, but a lot of the policies with this is, I actually like some of this idea, but I think this is more of a nonpartisan type of, it's not really a Democrat or a Republican. This is something that we should actually all be striving for anyway. It's not one side or the other. The only people who would probably be against this are the extreme leftists who are actually socialists, who don't think that business should do anything unless it's run by the government. So let's touch on the $15 an hour minimum wage. $15 an hour minimum wage is roughly $31,000 a year. After taxes, that comes out to about $25,000 at the high end at the tax. If you're paying a lot into your taxes, you're taking out the maximum number of If you're having the government take the maximum number of allowances out on your taxes, you're going to get $3,000 to $4,000 taken out. So you'll be at, well, I guess that's 26 or 27,000. My math is bad. I'm sorry. But can you tell me what high school kid in America, unless you're just trying to keep high school kids out of the job market at a young age, which that in itself is not a good idea. Like I was saying, it ties into education. If you teach kids, say, starting in 6th or 7th grade, how to take care of finances, what these things are about, and to have them start looking at things like this. They should start working when they're 14, 15 years old. They do now. I did. I started working at 15 years old. I worked at a pizza parlor for 2.5 years. Hated it. Absolutely hated it, but it was my first job. I'm supposed to hate it. It was my first job, but it was in the food service industry. Of course I'm supposed to hate it. Even at 20 hours a week, that's still $15,000 or $16,000 a year at $15 an hour. They don't need that much money. They have no extraneous bills. They have no, and until you're like 17 or 18, you can't even really, you're not supposed to pick up a knife. You're not supposed to do anything dangerous. You literally can run a cash register, take an order. You're not someone who's going to be actively involved in doing the work, quote unquote. There's no reason that those people need $15 an hour. And again, this is all unskilled labor. Why would you need somebody who has no skill, no training, and needs very little to do a job to make $15 an hour? The idea in this country is to make yourself better. And if you want to go to a job and let's say you go to work at McDonald's when you're 15 or 16 years old, 14, 15, 16 years old, however old you are, you want to go and you work at McDonald's, and you just, for some reason, you like the environment, you like the people, you like the owner of that particular franchise, and you work there. If you have no ambitions to be anything more than just an employee, you don't ever want to become a leader. You just want to stand in a window and push a button and say, thank you for your money. Have a nice day, which most of them don't even do that now, mind you. But if you just want to stand there and take money and give money back, take cards and give cards back, and you have no desire to go anywhere else in your life, you are the problem with this situation. It does not come from a company not willing to pay you. They are more than willing to pay you if you are willing to do the work. You're going to get your standard, you're going to get your regular raises, and you'll max out, because that's what jobs do. You don't get any more for working a menial job than a maximum amount. If you want more, you move up. You go from working a register to working the line. The more you understand about the business, the more you do, the more money you're worth. Eventually you get brought into supervision and eventually management. And then your ultimate goal, if that's what you want to do and you want to work at McDonald's for your life, you want to make that a career, is to become a franchisee, is open your own franchise, buy your own thing from McDonald's. That's what your ultimate goal should be. Not to sit there and flip the frickin' burger on the grill. There's no ambition in that. We as a nation are built off of ambition, off the desire to have the ambition to be something more than we are. This comes from you not wanting to have more, not wanting to be more, and expecting to have the equal amount that somebody who's sitting there working their fingers to the bone to become something next, to work their way up through the company to be something more than what they are at this particular moment. If you are not willing to do that, you don't deserve the extra. Now, while it is still unskilled labor, unskilled workers, I do believe that warehouse workers need to make more money than they do. Too many people working in warehouses, which is a dirty, hot, physical job, especially if you're loading and unloading trucks all day long. It really is crap. If that is what you do, these companies like this need to have more to offer their employees instead of the typical $9, $10, $12 an hour. Some companies like Amazon actually pay very well to start, but a lot of other smaller companies, it's like a revolving door. They'll go to a staffing service and say, we need 50 people by tomorrow. The staffing service sends you 50 people, pay them $8 an hour, and work them until they're basically dead and send them out the door. These companies need to be forced to pay their employees more, at least to start. I'm not talking their high-end stuff. They don't need to, a person who is maybe the warehouse manager or who works in the front office, who deals with all the business side of it. I'm not saying they do. If they come into an office position and they are basically a glorified file clerk, and all they do is they move papers from the printer or from a copier or a printer to somebody else's desk, and that's all they do, they don't need to make $14, $15 an hour, $16 an hour. They're perfectly okay making $8, $9, $10 an hour. But that's also a job that you're getting in the summers outside of high school. It's a job you're getting right out of high school for someone who's not who has a brain, who is looking at becoming an entrepreneur, is looking at becoming something more than just a file clerk, who wants to get into management and working for themselves. But here's the key. $15 an hour as a federal minimum wage is a bad idea. And I'll get off of that. I spent way too much time on that one anyway. Gun violence. Let's talk about the concept of a gun buyback for assault weapons. First of all, it's been said a billion times by anybody, by most people who actually know guns and who aren't completely stupid. There's no such thing as an assault weapon or an assault style weapon or military style firearms designed to fire rapidly. Anything that is full auto or burst fire is already illegal in the U.S., which is bullshit, utter bullshit. But military, just because it looks like a military style weapon, just because it looks like something that a military member carries in the field, doesn't mean it is. You can find the names all over the place, and the round that that the scary looking gun shoots, and it's 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. The bullet used for hunting, and it's like 4 inches long and 2 inches in diameter. That's an exaggeration. But you get what I'm saying. You got the smaller bullet and a bigger bullet, and the bigger bullet's the one that's okay because it goes in a hunting rifle. Before you go and start talking about what weapons need to be banned, what weapons need to be bought back, you need to understand what the issue is. First of all, the issue is not guns. The issue is criminals. If a criminal wants a gun, it's very easy to get them. They're a huge number. I do like the idea of a smart gun that either reads your fingerprints or some other type of biometric scanning to, even if it's like voice activated, I'm a nerd, so like Judge Dredd, where you can just say, what type of round you want to fire. Not really that fire, but you allow the gun to unlock with a voice ident, or even and I mean that's a little extreme because of what most people will be using guns for, especially now. Since this was put out there, since this was written, there have been a lot of changes that have gone on in the world, and one of the biggest issues right now is what the mainstream media is calling protests. What they are is violent armed riots. But right now, it almost seems as if everybody in the world, everybody in the country should have a gun. Every law-abiding citizen, at least. I'm questionable. I question whether or not the idea, because according to federal mandates and a lot of state mandates, it's illegal to own a gun if you have a felony conviction or have a criminal past. I don't even think it's felons, but if you apply for it and you have like 27 misdemeanors on your record, you won't be permitted to have the weapon. You won't get your license or your permit. And I'm kind of okay with that for the most part. But I mean, banning the weapons is not the answer. Taking the weapons out of the hands of criminals is the answer, and I'm not sure how to do that. And I think that is something that we as a country, we as a people, we as a society need to look at deeper and have more of a conversation about, instead of just having the two disparate sides of let everybody have their guns and nobody can have guns, and then the only people who end up having guns are the bad guys. The Second Amendment, I am pro Second Amendment, so and I believe that any restriction for any reason on getting a gun is an infringement on the Second Amendment. I don't care if you have 20. I understand why they don't let it, but I don't care if a person has 27 felonies and they're all violent. If he can have a gun, if he should be able to have a gun. That's how I feel about it. It is a right protected under the Second Amendment, just like voting. I don't like a lot of these laws, and I'm getting a little off topic here, but I don't like a lot of laws in a lot of states that take away a person's rights because they have a felony. So, that's something else I think we need to look at. But the Second Amendment is there to allow us to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government. It's not for the possession of weapons for hunting. It's not possession for whatever. It is for self-defense, not just from the criminal element, but from an overzealous country, from an overzealous government that would come to take away your rights. So I am very much against anything that puts any type of restriction on the Second Amendment. Anything that is like a buyback or a restriction or, I mean, in today's society, I am all for universal background checks. I'm actually in today's society. I want to reiterate this. In today's society, I'm actually like the idea of very deep background checks and mental health checks for people who have applied for firearm permits. So I know I sound wishy-washy. My personal opinion and what I understand for the time that we're in are two very disparate points of view. Okay. So let's just say that. I don't like the idea that there are any restrictions on guns of any type, but I understand why we have them. Let's go ahead and move on to, since we're talking about guns, let's move on to police reform. The common thing to be said right now is defund the police. People want to defund the police. They want to take money from the police department, and New York, one of the largest, if not the largest, I'm pretty sure it is the largest law enforcement organization in the nation, just got defunded $1 billion and had a anti-crime unit disbanded by the mayor, which is a whole other topic that we may talk about later. But to have Biden wants to defund the police somewhat, but he wants to shift the funds into community policing programs and things like that. I think we need to flood. I'm talking triple or quadruple their funding. And cops need much more time in training. I mean, most programs, from what I understand, are at the longest 6 months. You spend 6 months in the academy, you get out, you go and you work the street for a year as a rookie. I think there should be programs. And when you get into the police academy, the first thing you should do is you should have an aptitude test. What is your aptitude for? Are you more of a police person who is someone who will deal well with working, crime areas? Are you more of a community person? Are you someone who talks to people well, who can identify and put people at ease, that type of thing? Psychological evaluations for individuals who are in the police academy, and then train them based on their strengths. That's what the military does. And there are a lot of people talking about, the militarization of the militarization of the police is a bad idea. I agree with it up until a point. It's actually a line from a television show when the police are there to uphold the public trust, and the military is there to defend against enemies of the state. When the military becomes the police, they end up becoming the enemies of the state. I want to say that was Battlestar Galactica, and that, like I said, I'm a nerd. But I believe that if you have someone who is really, really good at de-escalation, who has an excellent ability to identify with people and put people at ease and talk to people and get people talking, they need to be trained differently than a person who is very good at being authoritative and breaking down issues. And you need to have, if you have a large police force like they do in New York, even in Indianapolis, which is, the biggest city near where I'm from. And if you've listened to any of my other podcasts, you know that. Or Los Angeles, Atlanta, Chicago, a lot of these really large places. You need to have different types of police in communities. You do need to have individuals who are much more, and I'm also talking, I'm not just talking, when I say community policing, I'm not just talking somebody who can actually, I'm talking increase your police presence to be the equivalent of 10% of your current population. If you have 8 million people in your city, you need 80,000 cops. I would actually almost, you need a lot of cops, a lot more than 35,000, like they have in New York. And you put these cops who are good at talking with people, you put them in New York. All officers have a partner. Most officers have a partner. I don't know that all officers do, but most officers have a partner. And you put cops together. One who is good at road work, dealing with the policing aspect, and one who is good with understanding people and working with people and talking to people. Those are the aspects we need. You need a balance. you do, and I believe wholeheartedly, you need a task force in a division within your police department that is focused on cutting crime. That goes into high crime areas, dressed in plain clothes, and finds the people that are doing criminal acts. I believe that. My first trip into college, now mind you, I've been to college twice, and neither time I really finished. It just gets boring. I did a lot of book learning in school. I'm very book smart, but college bores me. My first trip into college, right out of the military, I majored in criminal justice and with a focus in law enforcement. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a cop. Life works in mysterious ways, and I'm not a cop. Never was close to becoming a cop. So that's an issue. I do believe that you should have that. Being a police officer should have the equivalent of a 2-year or a trade school degree. You should come out of there with something more than just, I am a cop. I like that idea. I love the idea of expanding the idea of what policing is. Policing is not just writing tickets and taking down bad guys. It is forming a community. Because in these smaller communities where, everybody knows your name. I have a friend who lives in a town of less than 10,000 people. Everybody knows everybody. The police officers are on first name basis with everybody in town. They have very little crime. They have very little issue. They still have their speeder. They still have speeding. They still have domestic issues. But, the cops are, when the possibility of a cop who shows up to your house knowing at least one half of the parties involved in a domestic issue is very, very good. And if they don't know them, if the cops don't know them personally, they at least know who they are and they know a little bit about them. That's the type of community policing I think we need across the country, and including these big cities. And you can't do it with a population of 8 million like you have 8 to 10 million like you have in New York with 35,000 cops. That's too many people in too small an area with not enough enforcement. But so as a veteran myself, veterans' needs become something I'm very interested in. I have a lot of friends who've had some serious issues. And one very dear friend, I think still suffers from, PTSD and, from his time being deployed. So, I like an idea of having something that is focused on working for our veterans better. The VA is pretty much a joke. My mother, who is a veteran as well, she has received some fairly good treatment from the VA, but she's not seeking any psychiatric help or anything like that for dealing with PTSD or anything. And, the doctors that we have, at least here locally, are pretty good. They get a lot of doctors who are actually doctors from IU Health or some other place who are, working on their fellowships or whatever, who come in and work there also. So there are this particular local veterans hospital is really, really good. I like the idea of expanding upon that, on working to do right by American veterans. I like getting, I want to get back to a time, because there was a short time there where, as a nation, we weren't involved in any wars. And we didn't have very many people deployed and going through heavy combat scenarios. Over in the Middle East, we still have so many officers there, we still have so many military members there, and we need to shrink that down, and the people who are there need to come home and get the treatment that they deserve. So, I'm all for expanding Veterans Affairs programs. I love an idea of helping out military families. So anything that's going to help our military and our veterans and the people serving, I'm 100% for. But I've gone a little bit longer here than I originally intended to. So what I'm going to do is cut this off here. If you have any questions or you have any comments, go ahead and leave them in the comment section. We'll address them. You can also head over to if you're listening to us on Spreaker, you go ahead and leave a message or something on comment section. If you're listening to us anywhere else, head over to our Facebook page, Aztec Multimedia. and leave us a message there. You can also head over to our Twitter page and DM me there or you can DM me. I'm CrashD, at CrashD on Twitter, or at Aztec Multimedia, and we'll talk about your issue and anything you might want to say. But go ahead and hit us up over there, and we'll talk. Go ahead and if you know of a particular issue or a policy stand that the Democrats or that Joe Biden has taken that you want to discuss that I didn't discuss here, bring it on. I'm always willing to talk, always ready to expand my knowledge and, have a conversation and see if things can happen. There's a lot of other things I want to talk about. I want to talk about his immigration policy, path to citizenship, his investments in middle class, a lot of things I want to talk about, but I'm getting a little bit long here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here. Come on back next week, and we will be talking about something else. We'll probably actually discuss the Republican National Convention that's going on this week and Trump's agenda for his second term, should he be elected, and some interesting points about that. But, so head over to find us on Facebook, like I said, Aztec Multimedia. Find us on Twitter, Aztec Multinet. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Minds at Crashdown321, CRA5HD, 0WN321, or on Twitter at CrashD, CRA5HD. And that's just it. And until next time, have a good night.